Everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. You can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky. My name, Yossi Goslin, to get all sorts of cap analysis as transactions happen. It's going to be that time of year coming up. You can check all my work also on my name on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and follow Third Apron, my newsletter on Substack, for even deeper cap analysis. Eventually, I will cover the Nuggets again. And this is Team 23 of my offseason preview series. Almost done with them all. And joining me today to discuss the Nuggets, you can follow him on Twitter, Blue Sky, at HB Basketball. He's got his own Substack covering the NBA, and you can hear him talk about the Nuggets regularly on Locked On Nuggets. Matt Moore, how are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No, of course. So just kind of want to summarize as quickly as I can how the Nuggets timeline over the past few years, because as in addition to some of the changes in the CBA, but also just how they've added up, how the payroll's been running up, we're at the point where the roster is slowly chipping away. And that's been happening since 2023, where 2023 was like the peak of everything, where the roster still wasn't too expensive. They were able to have the deepest bench that they had up until that point. Now just slowly, like they had like 7 guys back then. Now it's kind of like closer to 5.5 to 6, depending on matchups. And so they kind of like maxed out what like the best version of the team could be before getting deeper into the tax. And they before, like, a lot of restrictions had to stifle them from doing more. Like, losing Bruce Brown, there's nothing they could do about that. They had to lose. They couldn't match any contract he got. KCP letting him go, in hindsight, that was for the best. Just that was too big of a contract. Thankfully, Christian Braun's been much better. He stepped up. He's up for an extension this summer. That's going to be a whole nother aspect of their offseason. So the thing is, it's going to continue chipping away, most likely, if they keep wanting to go with this core 4 and 5 guys. And, you got Jokic making a super max now. Murray's going to make a higher max now. Michael Porter Jr. still on his max contract. So they're stripped of all flexibility to really further improve this roster. They don't really have any picks. They traded most of their picks to get as many like current, like draft picks in the present to fill out the end of the bench. Mostly mixed results on that. So when you look at all their limitations and what in terms of assets to give up and like spending in general, I mean, how long can you envision this Denver iteration as like a highly competitive team? Because it's just crazy how fast time has passed, where now we're starting to feel like a mortality with this group.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to start here with how many more years do you think you're getting Jokic at a high level? Because I do think that your window is open as long as he is at an elite level, because he's such a good player at making everybody better around him. And so that might not mean that they are a favorite to win the title, or top 3 in odds to win the title, or top 3 in the West to win the title, but that window, I think, is open. And I think you can expect him to be good for probably another 4 seasons and before he really starts to drop off. So the question then is like, all right, so what else? And their big problem, and I'd be interested to know your thoughts on this, is that to me, the new CBA, particularly with squads like this that were constructed under the previous CBA, it almost requires a period of stepping back, that you have to take a dramatic move, not to tanking, but what they honestly need to do most, and they're really reluctant to do this because of ownership's feelings on the subject, but what they really need to do is they need to take Michael Porter Jr. and break his salary up into several smaller pieces. And finding somebody to even do that is difficult, let alone before you get to, will ownership sign off on that? Because Michael Porter Jr. is from Columbia, Missouri. Josh Kroenke went to the University of Missouri. There's a relationship there. So, like, that's where you start here. You could go even further and say you should probably do the same with Jamal Murray. Like, they would currently be looking to just create some flexibility by attaching second-round picks to Zeke Naji in order to just get that money off the books. You invested in him, you thought he was going to turn into something, and he's not. but they can't do that because they had to pay the Hornets, not had to, but they paid the Hornets 4 second rounders to take Reggie Jackson so they could add Russell Westbrook, who Nikola Jokic wanted. So like there's all these chains of events that kind of go about it. And from my perspective, I think there's a possibility of them being able to take a step down and then go back up. The problem is like currently what they are signaling right now is a refusal to accept reality, to be like, no. Everything's fine. This team is still the team that won the championship. Christian's even better. We just have to improve Julian Strother and Peyton Watson and get some better vibes in there with David Adelman, and that's going to get us back there. And most of us that cover the team are like, okay, so like definitely the Booth versus Malone thing was bad, but also a lot of your guys can't dribble, and that seems like it's a pretty significant problem. So as far as what their window is, I think it's the next 4 years. But if you ask me, is it more likely that they win in 4 years or next year? I have to say 4 years. And the odds of that aren't great because that's the very end of Jokic's window. And that to me is the struggle, is that I would count them out the following year because they're trying to make this thing work again. And I would count them out at the end of it because Jokic is going to be too far past his prime. So it's that second and third year that you really have to be like, better put it together sometime in there in order to win a second title.
So you're saying like 4 years of Jokic at like an MVP level. I could see it being even a little longer than that. Just with these all-time greats, they're just really able to stretch that like to now we're seeing KD, LeBron into year 18, 20-ish plus. Same thing with Curry. I would say I think Jokic could potentially do that. Now he's year 11. So yeah, as long as he is playing at that high level, they're going to keep trying to go for it. I do want to comment though about what you said about like taking a step back. And you don't mean like you're meaning mostly just to like, trade a guy or two, try to get a little cheaper to reset the timeline. I doubt they're going to really like, they could do that. That's like, you can redistribute the money a little bit. And we'll get into that kind of what are some ways they could do that, because they're going to have to do that within the next like 6 to 12 months, most likely. What I'm curious is, like in terms of taking like a significant step back, because I don't think they're going to do this as long as they're mostly healthy. But like you look at what the Warriors did after 2019, they suffered 2 big injuries. They had to take a massive step back. And looking ahead, when you're looking back at it, it ended up being for their benefit in a way to help fuel for their 2022 run. The Celtics could potentially, they're forced to take somewhat of a step back with this Tatum injury. So obviously the Nuggets aren't in a position to do something quite like that. But I just bring it up because they're just so maxed out as far as what they can do. And yeah, they're going to probably look to do some type of trade with one of their top 2 to 4 guys. They're going to have to, I think it's pretty obvious where they're going to try to look to start there to do that. But it's just, I kind of see, and you could push back on this if you disagree, but I'm starting to feel like a little bit of parallels with like where the Bucks were a couple of years ago, where they maxed out their situation. They had no picks, and whatever picks they had, they were not hitting on them. And all their guys were making so much money, and they really had to like dig deep into like minimum signings, getting just whatever they can to make it work. And it worked as long because Giannis was still a top 2 player. I'm a little worried now. I'm looking at their cap sheet right now, their situation over the next few years. They're going to need to get really creative with how they're going to extend this roster. Because now you got a Christian Brown. He's going to get a significant deal. Like, you cannot have their 4 guys and Christian Brown without getting so deep into the tax in a way that I don't think this organization is going to be comfortable with. They'll be way over the second apron. So something's going to come just from there. But I don't know. I'm just kind of worried about, they got to execute that first big trade, and they got to hit it. Like, they got to nail it, because if they don't nail that, then they're going to have to dig somewhere else. Now they're going to have to move a different guy. And just kind of like what the Bucks did, they did the Dame trade, that didn't work. Then they had to do the Middleton trade, that obviously didn't work. And now they're where they are. So they really need to nail that first trade, whatever that's going to be, so they can get those pieces, get like a cheaper guy. Maybe you're able to get like an actual, like, another sixth, seventh guy at the end of this trade. Otherwise, yeah, you're just chipping away more and faster. And then, you might resemble where the Bucks are right now. So that's my big fear. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. But right now is like a super critical time to avoid that, I think.
Yeah, the question here I think is an interesting one based off of ownership has a reputation for being frugal, and it's accurate in some respects. What gets kind of missed is the idea that they're actually averse to spending on roster. And the one thing that KSE, Crocky Sports and Entertainment, have been consistent on is they'll pay for premium talent.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to pay the tax. Now, the second apron is a different deal, which I'm sure you talked about before. And this is just like, I still continue to marvel that the owners literally built a system to where they're like, hey, can't spend money. I want to, but yeah, it limits our flexibility too much. Can't do it. That was the excuse for not re-signing KCP was, well, we can't do that. If we can't do that, we've got no flexibility. Oh, what did you end up using that flexibility for this year? Nothing. Yeah. Great business that you're in when you get to set up the rules. You're right in the first trade, but this is also why I continue to kind of go back to chip away at it as opposed to trying to fix it immediately, right? Is that instead of trading for an expiring contract, the better thing is take these big pieces and break them into smaller ones. Especially with a player like Jokic, you don't have to sacrifice contention if you get the different pieces correctly. Like if your starters go from a plus 11 net rating to a plus 6, but your bench unit with Jokic goes from a plus 2 back up to where it was in 2023 is like a plus 5, and your non-Jokic minutes go from a minus 11 to like a minus 2, your overall net rating is going to be good enough for you to get to where you want to go, and you'll be in the hunt, and you'll probably have a better team. And like that to me is their problem, is like they have no optionality. You mentioned the Bucks. I've made the comparison a lot between those two franchises a lot, so I appreciate you kind of bringing that one up, because the Bucks and the Nuggets were both set up with the same situation, which is you've got an all-time great, you won a title, you built your system under the previous CBA, then they changed the rules on you. And so what do? And the Bucks went for option A, which is, all right, we're just going to cycle through veterans. Wes Matthews and Jay Crowder and guys at the absolute end of their lifespans. And we're just going to just squeeze enough out to get there. The Nuggets went the other way, which is the Galaxy Brain 2 timelines concept. And to go like, no. What we do is you just keep refilling with good talent. And the problem with that line of thinking is, unless you are sending multiple assets to trade into the teens, you are never going to get good enough talent at picks 20 through 42 to be able to sustain what you need to in terms of just the talent level. Julian Strawther, going to be a good player in this league, going to be a rotation player, could wind up being a starter. Not a star player, and probably not a starter on a playoff team. Peyton Watson, unlimited potential. Guy could be a 3-level scorer with incredible defensive acumen. That's going to take him another 4 years. And by that time, you're outside of the window. And so those problems, I think, were this is the other issue with it. You mentioned the Warriors, and like they've taken a step back. But what's funny is, what do you do with that? Oh, you get a great draft pick and you add a new guy, and it was James Wiseman. It didn't do anything. Like, Pods is fine. Kuminga's fine. Neither were like massive parts of the title run. They just took 2 years to recover from 3 years or 5 years really, of title contention and how much that takes out of teams. And the Nuggets might have to do that if they suffer the same kind of injuries. Knock on wood, I hope they don't. But that to me is like the kind of differential there. Versus if you're going to keep trying to compete for a championship, the best way is to try and figure out a way to be, it's like, okay, we are lesser in talent, but we are greater than the sum of our former parts. And that to me is the challenge, I think, for this front office. When you are able to clear the books, you should do so and try and build. But free agency, there's some that think, and I'd be curious as to your thoughts on it, about whether we'll see free agency return to what it used to be. There's lots of talk about 2026, or if we're just past the time of free agency. But to me, this all comes back to, you're just going to have to break down these pieces. You can have Joker on the big contract. If you really have to, you can have Jamal, but you probably need to look at breaking down that part too. Gordon's fine. The number you've got Gordon on now is perfectly fine, I think, as a third, fourth weapon. But it's the Porter one that you've really got to deal with in the immediacy, and that's complicated by his injury history.
Yeah, look, back when they gave these deals to Murray and Porter, it was like a situation where, we got to pay these guys to keep them because no one really wants to come here. Well, 4 years later, now the Nuggets are at this point where they're kind of stuck because the lack of negotiation, or just, how those negotiations played out. And especially with the Porter contract, it's technically, it was a max contract, and it's arguably the worst value max contract in the league. I might be skipping someone, at least for like a 25% max. It's got to be down there. I'm glad you brought up, the draft pick thing where, yeah, they've been trading future draft picks to bring in present draft picks. They traded the 25 pick to OKC to bring in the pick that became Peyton Watson, I believe, like the 30th overall pick in a couple seconds. They also saved some money in that trade. They did another trade like that as well. The biggest draft pick hit in the past, 4 years is Christian Brown. Same draft as Peyton Watson. That was their own pick. And I think about what the Suns did trading their 2031 first round pick for 3 firsts. A lot of people right now, they're liking that deal more for the Jazz. But if you compare what the Nuggets got for trading a pick that far out versus what the Suns got, clearly the Nuggets did not get enough value if you're trading out far out future picks. And this is just another thing that's biting them. They can only trade 1 first round pick right now, like either 2031, 2032. So let's touch on what it could, how their first move probably could be, because I guess you're going to start with Michael Porter Jr. I'm not saying start as in trade him for sure, but that's the most obvious trade candidate with the 2 years, I believe $80 million left on his deal. Very interesting. I'm very interested in knowing what the value kind of turns out to be with him. And sorry, one to your last point about the tax stuff. Yeah, the Nuggets have paid tax over the last few years. They're going to keep paying tax, but now they're going to be in the repeater. And now the tax system is changing. It's going to be even higher now over the next few years. The rates are going to be higher the deeper you go. So there's still going to be somewhat of a line for how deep they want to go, especially now that they're about to pay more. I'm guessing they're going to probably just try to stay below the second apron like they've been doing the past few years. But back to Porter Jr., interesting guy where I think we're at the point where if you're a contending team and you're interested in him, we kind of see what the ceiling is, especially when you're playing in an ecosystem like the Nuggets next to Jokic. But the Nuggets can't just dump him, or they can't just trade him for anything. They got to be really careful with this deal, especially over the past few years. They've had they've been one of the least 3-point shooting attempt teams in the past few years. You get rid of Porter, it's you're already in the bottom, but now it's who's going to shoot now? Now you're really going to have Jokic have an even bigger load like he has this past year since KCP left. Maybe Adelman will just get them shooting more in general. We'll see if that might be something different he does versus Malone's system. So, I mean, where do you... So you're talking about breaking it up, but as far as getting the actual player, what exactly... aside from saving money and getting a little deeper, what kind of return can they get where you're getting some type of semblance of some of what he's got?
It's gonna have to be, and this is again the problem I think with the perception that ownership has of him, because they're very high on him. It's gonna have to be an acceptance of you are getting worse return, even in the aggregate, with some individual pieces that you're that you're really hoping to buy low on. You have to buy low. You're trading a guy with 3 back surgeries, making $30 million, with another 2 years left on his deal at close to $80 million. You're going to have to take an L on that trade. It's one of the problems is most Nuggets fans, when they start putting together trade proposals, they're oh, this is how we can move Zeke Nnaji. I'm no. You have to send something good with Zeke Nnaji to dump Zeke Nnaji. Michael Porter Jr. is the other thing that you have to move. And like this, I want to be very clear. Like Mike's been an absolute warrior, man. He has played so hard, so well. He adapted to his role. He has sacrificed a lot in terms of what he could be capable of in this league offensively in other systems to win. Like he wants to win and he wants to be known as a player that played, and he has played consistently. He has played through injuries multiple times. He could not lift his shoulder in the playoffs and was playing because they had nobody else they could go to. Like he literally had to have somebody in the locker room help him take his jersey off because he couldn't lift his shoulder up. He's tough as hell, but he's also a one-dimensional scorer who's not very good on defense. He's bad on defense, and that's with a history of back surgeries. So when we're talking about this, one of the ideas that was floated, there were two different conversations that were held for MPJ prior to. There is conflict over this. My understanding, talking to people in the organization, is that ownership made it clear that they did not want Michael Porter Jr. traded for the offers that were on the table. He didn't rule out another deal coming to the forefront, but that's what they said. Josh Kroenke has denied that that is the case, that there was never an edict not to trade Porter. I don't think there was an edict. I just think it was made known of not for what was out there. A conversation with the Bulls, because Arturas Karnisovas knows Porter from having been in Denver when they drafted him. For Ayo Dosunmu, maybe some other pieces, potentially Zach LaVine at the time. A couple of conversations had there. The other was to Atlanta, and it was going to be DeAndre Hunter, Bogdanovich, and those pieces in return. And that made the most sense. MPJ's got is a very close friend of Trae Young's, so there's already like a locker room familiarity there. But part of the problem is that, one, no one ever knows who's running the Hawks. No one ever knows who's running the Hawks. Whoever someone calls and they're like, yeah, that guy's in charge. And then someone else calls and it's like, no, it's the other guy that's in charge. So you never know. And then two, the Nuggets moved away from those conversations. And so you see Hunter go to Cleveland and Bogdanovich go to the Clippers. But those are the type of deals that we're kind of looking for here, where it's, if a team is facing a situation where they say, we have to pay this guy and we don't want to. We don't want to lock into a 4-year deal. Well, now you've got 2 years left on Porter. So maybe that's a little bit more manageable. And then you've also got the option of, like, if you're a team that's so offensively strapped, you're just terrible offensively, and you need the shooting. Well, Porter is a 6'10", 50, 40, 90 shooter. That's who he is. Now a team like, you start to point to teams like the Magic. Well, it doesn't make sense for the Magic. They need a guard. You can't play Porter and Franz and Paolo together, so that doesn't make any sense. That's where it gets really difficult. But those are the kind of teams that they're going to have to look at. Is you're going to have to look for teams that have buy low assets with contract situations the teams are uncomfortable with in order to facilitate this deal, which is one of the reasons why I think that they've concluded we're never going to get market value that equals or exceeds our investor value at any sort of acceptable level. So we're just going to retain. But I do think that probably when he's an expiring contract, those conversations start to shift a little bit with that much money coming off the books.
Yeah, I think now that we're getting to the end of that deal, it's going to be it's going to get easier to move him. And I think part of the value is, if you're a team interested in him, can you maybe get him to extend on something already that's like a little less than what he's getting now? Because he's just making a little too much right now. But if you can get his percentage somewhere that just is a little more manageable, that I'm sure could be baked into some of these negotiations. So the question with Michael Porter Jr. is there an acceptable deal that gets you a suitable replacement at the wing, redistributes the money into an additional rotation player, maybe two on top of that, and you're not giving up assets? Because they can trade an additional first, and they can't do that. You cannot trade like a first, right? An additional first right now just to like get a team interested in moving him.
Yep.
So when evaluating him, like I said, if you're a contending team looking at him as like a fourth or fifth option, it's going to be very difficult for a team to get there right now. But if you're looking at a team that's like out of the playoffs, they're looking to make a step, win some more games, get into the playoffs, that's a different story. And that's where I think his value can actually potentially be like a positive in a deal. So you brought up the Bulls, which is exactly who I was going to get into, because there were those rumors. The Nuggets were potentially interested in getting Zach LaVine for him. That Michael Porter Jr. would be a lot more valuable to a team like the Bulls than, most competitive teams already, because he's an interesting guy where he just had his best. Michael Porter Jr. just had his best regular season, or one of his best seasons, but then just had his biggest playoff disparity. Like he had his worst playoffs in years, and that's the complicating aspect. So if you're a team like the Bulls, like that makes a lot of sense to bring a guy like him in. He can definitely raise their floor and help get him closer to where they want to be. I doubt though there's a 2-team trade out there that gets something like that done. I'm not sure what a team like the Bulls would have that really makes total sense from the Nuggets. The only 2-team trade I kind of see happening, maybe they send him to the Nets and get like Cam Johnson back. Maybe they could also throw in Zeke Naji, but that might require a pick to get the Nets interested. So maybe not there. So when I look at some of these wings, like you mentioned DeAndre Hunter, maybe that's a guy that could still potentially be in play. Like if the Cavs, they're deep in the tax now after losing in the playoffs this early. Maybe if they want to save money or shift some pieces around, maybe the Nuggets can get involved for a guy like him. If the Heat are going to get Kevin Durant or someone like an all-star, and that requires you move Wiggins, maybe also that's somewhere where Nuggets can get involved. Get a Wiggins who's like $10 million cheaper. Do you consider bringing a guy like Jeremy Grant back? Probably not. Makes a little less, but he's got that extra year on the deal. If the Rockets do a consolidation trade, could you maybe get involved for Dylan Brooks? Makes a lot less than Michael Porter Jr. So I think there's a lot of guys they can target. It just kind of falls down to how do you construct a trade to make every party make it worthwhile for each team. Because when you're looking at just the types of returns you can hopefully get for him, I think this is kind of realistically the best case scenario right now. And maybe you can get an extra guy back, an extra draft pick. So it's just about finding the team that he brings more value to. And there's probably a handful of teams like the Bulls that he can really help.
I don't want to call him a toxic asset. That's too far. But I will say that he is a player that you probably need to be willing to trade for toxic assets. A pretty rational one, honestly, is MPJ of the Hornets, along with potentially Zeke Naji for Grant Williams and Miles Bridges. Bridges is a much better player, but comes with the caveat of being uniquely a terrible human being. And the Hornets have been trying to fix their locker room culture for years. Now they just put out this big thing about how much he does in the community, etc. But there's also been pretty consistent rumors of the Hornets basically signed him because they couldn't figure out any way to move him and they couldn't add anyone else. They couldn't get any calls for any free agents last summer. So they're like, we can't just not have the spot. So we're going to bring back Bridges. And so I think to be open to moving him. Williams coming off the injury, obviously low value. You add another shooter next to LaMelo, and you're gearing up for an all-offense kind of team. Now, I think that's difficult for Charles Lee because he wants to play more of a defensive style, but they're probably more willing to take on a contract like Zeke Naji and that kind of deal. And what that does mostly for the Nuggets is look, Bridges on 2 years remaining. That gets you out. That gets you more flexibility quicker. You're just trying to like you kind of talked about, is get out of the impending boulder running downhill at you and try and whittle that down. And if that means you take on some of these assets where both these guys are on 2-year deals, then you've got kind of the opportunity to maybe be able to reshape that in a different kind of way while also reducing it and you get off Zeke Naji's money and you reduce the entire thing, and maybe you can send Bridges back out or whatever. There's also been a lot of conversation about, you use MPJ for one deal, and then you either use those assets in tandem with Jamal Murray or you trade Jamal Murray as well for a different combo of assets. And one of these things is you could do all these kind of mechanisms that I'm talking about, which I genuinely do believe is worth considering, of just hey, what if we just had 10 really good players, all veteran, good NBA players next to Jokic, 10 guys who are all playoff viable. Do you really need a star? Do you really need an all-star guy? And the answer is probably gonna be yeah. You still need another guy to be able to create. Question is, can you find that in a buy low spot? Can you find a guy that, this to me is the most, this is the highest inefficiency in the market right now, is trying to find guys where, it's the Tyrese Halliburton. It's yeah, he's a pretty good player, but come on. You're getting Domantas Sabonis. Come on. And then you get Tyrese Halliburton and you're oh, well, you have the best offensive engine in the Eastern Conference. That's neat. That's the type of trades I think that you've got to be able to look at, not just if you're Denver, but if you're any of these teams. So those are kind of some of my other thoughts here. But like, you can't do like Porter for Cam Johnson. The Nets are going to be like, sure, if you could find 2 other first round picks. Otherwise, no way. And that I think is kind of the struggle they're going to face.
But when looking at some of the other guys, like first of all, yeah, like a Hornets trade, those pieces don't have to come back to Denver. It could be a bigger trade.
Yep.
You know, they can get other pieces. But like when I look at a guy like Wiggins, for example, very mixed, production over the past few years. You could squint at the situation and be like, look, he makes $10 million a year less than Porter. Yeah, he's not the shooter Porter is, but like what maybe playing next to Jokic can bring another level of them. Yeah, you gotta squint a little bit about those type of things. But still, like you can take a look at a lot of these guys that they just like a little step below Porter, but probably all a little better defensively, but like, can definitely still keep, not I wouldn't even consider bringing these guys as like, chipping away. I feel like you could bring in a guy like this and like one of those guys I mentioned, and that might help you make a deeper team without really losing without really losing much of your ceiling. Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of that type of trade you mentioned where you're trading one of your top guys now to get like a younger version of another guy. Like, yeah, if you're trading Jamal Murray, I'd have to think about that. I don't know what guy there is right now that is just still young and full of potential that you can get because another team's trying to speed up their timeline now. If they can take advantage of that, yeah, absolutely, they should definitely consider it. I have sort of a version of that, but I want to get to another guy, which, I don't know if you've thought about him too. You brought up Porter Jr. and you brought up Murray. I wouldn't 100% rule out an Aaron Gordon trade. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's unlikely, mainly because they don't have anyone else ready. Like Peyton Watson's not ready for that role. He's on the last year of his deal before his extension kicks in. Going to bring him up to $30 million a year. And AG was absolutely fantastic in these playoffs. So many clutch moments. A lot, especially with his salary still being relatively low, it's possible this could be the best moment, especially coming off this playoff performance, to get something right now, right before he turns 30. That could be the opportunity you're talking about more realistically, like this offseason or within the next year, for the Nuggets to get a younger guy with a lot of upside. Not necessarily a lead guard, but like maybe you can get someone like something I thought about. I don't think this would happen, but we'll bring up the Kings. What if they want to bring in Aaron Gordon because they think they have Sabonis, like mini Jokic. They think that can help them get him closer to the playoffs, and you can get a guy like Keegan Murray somehow. That's like the type of deal I think that would exactly hit what you're talking about. Still on his rookie deal, is going to get an extension, will probably be around what Gordon's making now. So that's the type of opportunity I think that if they are looking for that, probably more realistically, you could get it through trading Aaron Gordon. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it was very much in play before this playoff run. And now it's like Jokic has literally said he's his favorite teammate ever. He is now etched in Nuggets fans' hearts forever for the game-winning dunk, the game-winning three. Yeah. Like it would, and it goes further than that too. Because he took a good faith deal to take less to stay with this core, and moving on with him would have bad ramifications for their reputation. And specifically, he is a clutch agent and clutch client. And that's not an agency representation team that you want to piss off. That is just not a good idea. And so I think that there's like ramifications of that. I also just think it'd be devastating for the locker room. Like they need AG. AG is like one of the best people to have in the building. Everyone universally loves and appreciates Aaron Gordon. I don't disagree based on the age and the contract and all those type of things. I think that the context of this spring run combined with the good faith efforts that they've made make that a very difficult deal now to complete. I would have honestly been like, look, if they had just petered out in the first round, have been like, look, AG, we signed you under this deal. We had every intention to keep it together, but like we gotta do what's best for Jokic, and this is the best deal that we can find. You could probably get there a little bit, but now I don't think it's really feasible. That you're gonna have to wait at least 2 years, I think, before you trade AG.
No, I agree. It's unlikely. It would have to take like a really high upside guy, someone maybe they've scouted really is high on for them to really consider doing that now. I don't know if a Keegan's that level of guy, but it would have to be someone like they really like. The only thing is then you can delay trading Porter Jr. Maybe because then you give him a little bit of time to build up his value. You could try to trade him again, but yeah, I agree with you. It's probably unlikely. But as far as things go, like they don't need to rush to do anything right now. Technically, they could take things into the trade deadline. Like they're heading into the offseason with the same type of situation they've had over the past 2 off seasons, where they're over the tax, they're over the first apron, but they're well enough below the second apron where they can use that tax MLE. They've been the only team since the new CBA changed the mid-level exception, how that works, to use the tax MLE, using it on Reggie Jackson and Dario Saric. So they're in position to just do that again. So if they don't do anything now, I mean, I'll leave this to you. Like, do you think they have to do something like sooner than later, or do you think they could afford to like mostly run back this team right now? They already have 13 guys under contract. They'd have the hope that a couple more of their guys can step up. Like internally they can look, Daron Holmes, he's gonna be recovered. Let's see how he can give you guys enough to get through the first half of the regular season. Hopefully one of, Pickett can be like a rotational mainstay. Do you think the Nuggets can risk going into the regular season and like hoping that at least some of their guys can raise their value so you have a better opportunity to trade them later? Or do you think it's better to act sooner than later?
I think they need to do something immediately. I think they are going to do nothing. The politics of all this is the biggest thing I've learned in being around locker rooms the past 13 years, that these things are so much more complicated than the numbers on the cap sheet or the X's and O's on the box score. It's so much more complicated. And one of them in this case is that he is technically vice chairman, but he is the acting governor of the team, Josh Kroenke. He has a lot of strong attachments to this team. Like he believes in these players as people. He believes in Michael Porter Jr. He believes in Aaron Gordon. He believes in Jamal Murray. Like Jamal Murray is a homegrown talent that has delivered for them in huge playoff games and won them a championship alongside Joker. Now that to me goes entirely counter to their stated goal of, we understand that we have let down Nikola Jokic and we have to make sure that we maximize this window. They are speaking out of both sides of their mouth by being like, we're going to focus on internal development, but also we have to maximize this window with Joker, and we understand how important this is. But banking a lot on this, like their solution right now is quite literally David Adelman will fix it. That's literally what they're going in with. Now, I say that, and the deals may come to them, right? If you go into the offseason and somebody comes in and is like, look, we are so desperate to shake this up that we'll take MPJ and give you this. And then they're like, okay, cool. That can obviously happen. But the plan right now is to very much like just operate on the margins. And I think that's a terrible mistake. I think you used to be able to get by with Porter, Jokic, and Murray on the floor. You could do that. You could survive defensively. You can't do it anymore. Joker is not as good as he was defensively because he's worn down from so many minutes that he's worse than he was defensively. People used to think he was terrible on defense, and I'd be like, well, no, actually, he's okay. Now, everyone's like, well, no, he's not good, but he's not always the worst. I'm like, oh, he's pretty bad now. And when you complicate that with a guard that can't get around screens and Jamal Murray and can't stay healthy, and Porter, who's an isolation target and gets killed on the backdoor, and you have to play at the level in pick and roll coverage with Joker, which means your weak side guys have to be athletic and fast, and neither one are. It causes a lot of problems. So, like, to me, they need to reinvent this roster. That they need to shake this up. That they need to just be like, hey, we understand how big of a deal this is with Joker. We are not going to sit by idly. We understand that these guys, they will always be Nuggets. They will always be part of the team that won a championship. But our obligation is to Nikola Jokic right now and maximizing this window with him.
I think you
That's
might
the
be.
case. Do what?
I was just gonna say, I think you might be right. You were saying how you think they got to do something now, but your ultimate feeling is they're just gonna mostly not run it back for the most part to start the season, and that might not even be their choice, even if they want to shake it up again. Like their asset deficit, it's a problem. They're just so hamstrung. They really like. I don't think they have a second round. I think they only have one second round pick to trade in 2032 because they traded 3 to dump Reggie Jackson so they could sign Saric.
This again gets into how far a step do you want to take back, right? Like if you're able to take a massive step back, but you replenish some of the assets, like even if you were to be like, hey, we're going to trade MPJ for several pieces, and then we're going to move those pieces for worse pieces and picks, it might honestly be better for their long-term potential because it would clear so much money off of the cap while replenishing that draft stock. But good luck trying to convince ownership of doing that. So now you're kind of in this position where like they are kind of stuck. This is why they are very much like, well, Julian Strother and Peyton Watson and Jalen Pickett, and I guess Zeke Naji at age 24. Go get him, Tiger. And that's going to be the plan.
Well, there's one thing we didn't talk about and this is arguably the most important aspect of their offseason. And this could be something that does get them, motivated to do something to shake things up a little bit. Jokic is extension eligible. He can add 3 years, 200 something million. Now, if he doesn't extend it, fans shouldn't be worried because there's also like a financial reasoning where if he does it next year, he can get an additional year. So, there's it would make he's gonna keep playing at this level. Like he'll get that 4-year extension. He'll get the 4th year if he waits next year if he wants that. But I figured the Nuggets probably would feel a lot better if they can secure him now. And just kind of back to our Bucks parallels, they wanted to extend Giannis. They did the Dame trade, and that shortly after convinced Giannis to sign the max extension. So, yeah, like I would imagine they want to, especially after the series they just had against OKC, they took them to the brink up until that last game. And they're probably feeling like, okay, we're a lot closer than things appear. So yeah, I could see them wanting to run it back. But if there is something they can do that secures Jokic getting an extension now, and that might involve, moving one of their, Porter Jr. or Gordon, most likely Porter Jr., maybe involving a first round pick. If there's something out there that can convince him to do it now, that might be enough for them to make that aggressive move.
So Joker's not the same kid he was back in like 2017 when he was just happy-go-lucky and just like happy to be here. He's very different now. And it's possible that he does in fact make it known, I'm not putting my name on a contract unless you can show me you built a better team around me. It's possible. My expectation is that there is no issue and he signs the Supermax the minute that it's available to him. And if you want to know my honest to God biggest reason why I think that's the case, I think moving sounds like a big hassle. Not kidding. That's how the man's wired. Like, I could honestly see him saying, well, look, I could go somewhere else and it could not work. You could win, you could not win. You could win here, I've won here, I've not won here. He's just very matter of fact about these things. And the Cronkies and KSE has been very good to him. Denver's been very good to him. And while I don't, I would consider him a loyal person, to the extent that I know him. Will he make it known what he wants? I think for sure. But I also do not think that he is of the mindset of like, you better get this guy and this guy and this guy. He is much more of, that's not my pay grade. My understanding on the firings that occurred where he was consulted about his feelings on the team and the direction and what he's been frustrated with. But at no point was he asked, do you want us to fire Michael Malone or Calvin Booth? I don't think that would have ever happened. And if he had been asked that, which he wasn't, I think he would have answered, that's above my pay grade. He would have said that pretty consistently, which is funny because it technically, very literally, is not above his pay grade. There is nobody that is above his pay grade. But that to me is how he will feel. So I don't think that they're going to feel a lot of pressure from him, but I could be wrong on that because he was really frustrated last year. This is the most frustrated the organization has ever seen him, and it was evident in every locker room interaction and every press conference and in any sort of conversation with anybody inside the organization.
Well, in that case, he'll probably just want to decide, do I want to secure 3 years now or wait a year to get that fourth year? Because then I think it'll be like 4 for 300, something like that. It just, does he want to secure some money now or secure more later? I guess that's what it will come down to at the end for him. But Matt, I think we've gone about just over everything. I think it should be a fascinating offseason for the Nuggets. I get the feeling they'll probably do a little something earlier than later. It will just be a question of, like you mentioned, hopefully they don't, they might have to lose some value, but hopefully not too much, and hopefully it could extend their window for a long time. But thanks for joining me the show. I really appreciate you doing this. You got anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah. I've got 2 new articles up. One about the Nuggets situation, kind of an inside look at what's going on with the organization internally as they look to make a GM hire at some point. I've got articles up on my Hardwood Paroxysm Substack about the playoffs. And coming on Monday, I'm actually making the argument, based off of our conversations, that the NBA needs to change its bylaws to remove the Stepien rule. That's coming on Monday.
Interesting. I'm more pro getting rid of those frozen draft pick things. It's just so bizarre. But no, I do think there could be I could see both sides wanting to do some types of changes to the way just draft pick trades are in the future. So yeah, and everyone make sure you can check out his Substack, Hardwood Paroxysm. You can hear him talk regularly on Locked On Nuggets, and make sure you're following him on Twitter and Blue Sky at HB Basketball. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll probably be back this weekend for another team. Got a video coming out either tomorrow or Saturday. And man, make sure you're following me on Twitter, Blue Sky, my name. Same thing, subscribe to everything, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and subscribe to Third Apron. I'm going to have an even deeper salary cap analysis on them, get a little more into Jokic's extension, and just kind of like more into what their multi-year projections could be with a Brown extension, and how that can like lead to all sorts of ridiculous tax projections if they keep running it back fully. And yeah, everyone, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later.